Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 13 of The Phoenix from the Ashes, written by Stephanie Phillips and art by Marco Renna. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Up to this point, the Phoenix has taken flight once more to bring balance to the cosmos. However, during her cosmos guardianship, Jean Grey was shocked to receive a psychic message from Sara, her long-dead sister. Using the Phoenix Force to access the White Hot Room, Jean found her sister alive and well in an intergalactic mutant sanctuary called Greyhaven. There, Sara uses her mutant ability to unlock the latent potential of other mutants, but she doesn't remember how she got there or how she evaded death. But someone who might have the answers just arrived on the scene: Jean's stepson, the time-traveling mutant, Cable. So with that said, this issue opens with a narrator saying, "I tried to protect him, the child of my husband and my clone, Nathan Christopher Summer, a baby thrust into the future to save him from a techno-organic virus. And when Scott and I later found ourselves in the same future, I tried to teach him that he was special, that he had abilities that made him different, and that those same abilities could help him survive in a world filled with cruelty. But sometimes, despite your best efforts, your kids might still grow up to travel back in time and try to kill you. Well, maybe not kill, but lightly maim." So far, Cable hasn't dealt any lethal blows, and knowing him, that's a very deliberate choice. So with that narration out there, Jean asked Cable why he won't talk to her, to which Cable responded by saying, "Why won't you just read my mind?" Now that answer led Jean to come back and say, "Because I know you're a powerful enough telepath to set mental traps." And in cocky Cable fashion, he shot back and said, "That's part of the fun, Red." So as Cable started to return to his feet, Jean threw her hands into the air and announced, "Nathan, please. If you would just explain to me why you're here, I could help." So with the offer out there, Cable answered by saying, "I'm here for her," the imposter claiming to be Sara Grey. Now with Cable's intentions known, Sara's guard came running up behind him and shouted, "You will not lay a hand on Sara Grey," as he placed him in a headlock. And then he went on to say, "I owe my life to Sara, and I would die before letting you." But right before the man could finish his statement, Cable drove him into a wall and said, "Then you'll die." So with his grip loosening up, Cable quickly turned around and started to beat the crap out of him. And once some distance was placed between them, the man went on to say, "When Sara found me, I was a resistance fighter, nothing more. Now she unlocked my true powers." So with that statement mentioned, the man went to launch his attack, but to his surprise, nothing happened at all. And with a smile on his face, Cable went in for a punch and mutter, "Well, I appreciated the dramatic build-up." But before he was able to connect his hit, Jean stopped him in his tracks and asked, "How many times have we told you no roughhousing?" So with the battle over, Jean went on to continue to say, "You know you can't beat me, and you know you won't get to my sister, so why don't you explain?" Now with that point made, Cable then went on to answer by saying, "See, that's the thing, this isn't your sister. You felt an echo that you yourself created. She's as real as a memory, sure, but not the real thing. Not in the way that you are real." Now with this revelation out there, Jean went on to say, "No, you're wrong." But regardless of what Jean stated, Cable went on to continue to say, "You're letting your emotions cloud your ability to see this for what it really is." So with all avenues exhausted, Cable went on to say, "I'm sorry about this, Red, but it's the only way," and then initiated a time slide. And as Jean was asking what he was doing, Cable just replied by saying, "You'll hear what I have to say, but you won't listen. Not unless you experience the truth for yourself." So with the time slide starting, Sara in her panic went on to ask, "What's going on? What's happening? And why is he saying I'm not real?" Now with that playing out, Cable took hold of Jean's hand and took off through the portal, just as Sara ordered Kel to destroy the gate. But with Jean out of reach, Sara attempted to go after her, only for Kel to stop her and say, "Wait, you don't know where they're going." With that going down, Sara turned to Kel and mentioned, "I just found her, I can't lose her again. Get the twins. I want them tracking Jean's location immediately." Now as of right now, we don't know who the twins are, but in the meantime, on the next page, we pick back up with Cable and Jean in a wasteland. And while they were there, we get to see Jean on her knees asking why, as Cable went on to say, "That's the difference between us." And before Cable could continue his statement, Jean interrupted him and said that I could never inflict such harm on you. But regardless of Jean's statement, Cable just picked back up where he left off and said that I'm able to set aside sentiment in favor of survival. Following that statement, Jean stood to her feet and asked, "Where in the future, or better yet, possibilities are we?" To that Cable answered with, "The only possibility if you continue to deny the truth about Sara Grey." Now this triggered Jean because she shouted, if Sara was lying about what? About who she is, I would know. I would feel it. But that was when Cable corrected her and uttered, she's not lying. And before he could continue his statement, Cable quickly took out a weapon and opened fire right by Jean's face, nearly hitting her, in order to eliminate the creature behind her. And once its head was gone, Cable then went on to say, I'm not trying to hurt you, Red. I'm trying to save everyone. So with that done, several more creatures started to circle them, as Cable continued to explain, saying, a psychic blast was sent throughout the universe that was so powerful even I could feel it in the future. It was like the entire timeline shuddered. I don't suppose you'd know anything about that. Now with a hand placed on her forehead, Jean then answered him by saying, I sent out a wave of psychic energy to keep the powers of the dark gods from spreading. They were using the nexus of all realities to plunge this universe and the next into the shadow realm. But that's not related to Sara or an apocalyptic future filled with monsters. I stopped them. And with a sarcastic tone, Cable just replied by saying, it's a bad day when I have to connect the dots for Jean Grey, the Phoenix. Now with the pieces lining up, Jean had a moment of clarity and let out a burst of energy and destroyed the remaining creatures before continuing her conversation with Cable, saying, I didn't mean to create Sara. When I sent out the wave, I connected myself to the universe, putting a piece of myself in the stars. Then Cable continued her line of thought and said, and Sara Grey is the personification of that energy, that link you established. And now her existence is killing the universe. You know what you have to do to save. But before he could finish his statement, Jean slapped the heck out of him and stated that she is her sister. And then she continued to say, my psychic energy may have brought her into existence, but she does exist. She is a real person. She already died once, and I will not let it happen again. There must be a way to prevent this future and keep Sara. And like an adult in the room, Cable stated, she's not a pet, and she shouldn't exist. But with emotion in Jean's eyes, she sadly said, but she does exist. She's a living, breathing human being built from my love and longing for Sara. None of that is her fault. But regardless of who was at fault, Cable went on to say, not her fault, but the death of the universe will be if you don't act. She is an anomaly, and the universe does not take kindly to those, Jean. She's a fracture in reality that will just keep growing and spreading, destroying everything and everyone you love. Now this was something Jean didn't want to hear, for she cried out and said, you'd have me kill an innocent person, my sister no less. You're acting apathetic, but even you couldn't do it when you had the chance. When you first arrived, you shot Sara and stunned her instead of killing her. To that comment, Cable replied by saying, maybe I knew better than to awaken the Dark Phoenix by gunning down her sister. I'm trying to prevent one apocalypse, not start another. If you would just focus your senses for a moment, I know you'll feel that something is wrong. So with that realization setting in, Jean then went on to say, the White Hot Room. It's connected to the very spine of the entire universe, and the White Hot Room was falling apart around me. I ignored it. I ignored the signs. I ignored that Sara never asked about her kids or Paul, her husband. I ignored the inaccuracies in her story. Then, in a rare show of empathy, Cable went on to comfort Jean by saying, you acted the way anyone would act in this situation. But you aren't just anyone, you're the Phoenix. Now with that out there, we then transition over to Sara arriving on the scene with her team ready to track down Jean. Because according to Sara, Jean was her sister and she lost her. And as they stood there, we learned that the twins were key to them finding Jean, for one was a master of tracking and the other was a teleporter. And one thing the writer made sure to point out was that these two were never wrong before when it came to finding someone. Now this led Sara to say, Cable did something to Jean's psychic abilities, so maybe he also did something to prevent us from following him. Now with this trail of thought, Kel then added that maybe she is here, but in a different time. With that stated, Kel then went on to say, before Cable left, he said something about a time slide. Vex and Ro brought us to the right place, but the wrong time. So with that cleared up, a very important voice came out of nowhere and whispered, very astute for a mortal. Jean Grey is in the future, a future where all the universe is in ruin because of you. And as Sara turned her head, she was met by none other than the one between reality and imagination. None other than the Inbetweener, and as it floated down, it said, and I think it's time we had a conversation. And with that said, this issue of the Phoenix comes to an end. Now when it comes to this issue and storyline in general, I will admit that when they introduced Sara, I wasn't really excited, but I was curious about what they were doing. But with the introduction of the Inbetweener into the mix, they now have my attention. Because outside of the X titles, I have always been interested in Marvel's cosmic entities. And with more and more of them intertwining with the X titles, I'm completely on board. With Storm out there doing her thing and Jean over here doing hers, I can't help but to be excited to see where all this is going. Now down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.